Welcome everyone. This is our Wednesday Wisdom. This is where we go over tips, tricks, and knowledge of instrument repair. Today we're going to be going over the RooPads Extreme and how to set up a saxophone body to install these and achieve the best results. So the first thing that we're going to ask is, what makes the Extreme pads a little different than standard pads, and why do we have to do all this prep? And basically the answer to that question is it has to do with the type of felt that we use in the pad as well as the construction of the pad. So I'm going to switch the camera here if I can. There we go. A traditional saxophone pad is going to have a type of felt which is a wool felt, and that is going to be fairly flexible. And this is great for traditional style pads where you're using a lot of heat and you're pulling the pad into place, and it needs to have a lot of flexibility to work quickly and be stable. The RooPads Extreme have a synthetic felt, and this is a more rigid felt that doesn't really care about moisture. So the natural felt that Ryan is that's on the table, that if that gets wet, that has the tendency to expand and can cause you problems. But with the synthetic felt, it doesn't care about water. The other aspect of it is that it naturally just kind of wants to lay flat and stay in a resting flat position. So when Ryan gets a little flick, it kind of just goes back to a flat position, whereas the woven natural felt has a tendency to bend and be manipulated a little more easily. The other reason that the RooPads Extreme are a little more rigid is that the pads themselves are laminated. So they have a piece of leather on the felt that's been glued on to seal the felt from any sort of air or water itself, and it sometimes also has some fiber mesh that we use to control the thickness of the pad, and it also has the cardboard backing, which isn't on there. And anytime that you have materials laminated together, they're going to be more rigid than something that is not. So that's why we need to go over and do a little more prep when we're getting ready to install these. And the first thing that we're going to do is talk about the process of key fitting. And Ryan's just going to show us briefly what's the difference between, say, an instrument that doesn't have tight fitting keys and one that does.
Well, this is, you can see here, if I grab, let's say this B key here, you can actually see how the whole key will actually shift side to side over that pad cup. It's really important for RooPad Extreme because they are such a flat pad that all the prep work has to be done prior to actually installing the RooPad. So the first thing being tight fitting key work. So you can see here, this would be unacceptable for a RooPad Extreme because, again, once you seat that pad, you want it to just stay right there. You don't want it to shift over that tone hole. That would, again, create leaks. So most of this would need to be tightened up quite a bit.
And Ryan, the next step for installing the RooPads Extreme, now these steps don't necessarily have to be in this order since they're all kind of independent, but the next one on our list is to level the pad cups.
Correct, yeah. So it's very important, again, we're putting a flat level pad. We want to put that into a flat pad cup. And if we have any bows or dips, and if it's uneven, we have to take care of that. So you can see here, I'm taking my bench block, putting the pad cup on it, and you can actually see it wiggle back and forth. Okay, you can see when I press in the back, there's a little bit of a gap on the front portion there. So I would need to level this. I do this using a rawhide mallet, and I'm not just going to try to hammer down it with the whole pad cup laying on the bench anvil like that. What I would need to do is actually hang that section over that's sticking up too far, and I hit right on the rim here and kind of that glancing blow to try to level that out. And I'm just going to go put it back on and see if I can check. A little less of a wiggle, but it's still there. Again, just hanging that portion over. Just that glancing blow. And there we are.
Nice.
So you can get it nice and level. Yeah, no more wiggle. So that's important. And the other thing to do, not only to level the pad cup, is to check the pad rim. Okay, making sure that there are no dents going in here on the pad rim itself.
Now, Ryan, can you also talk about our next step, which is pad cup orientation.
Absolutely, yes. Pad cup orientation is basically kind of what we see here, where we have a tone hole, we have a pad cup, and then we have the pad sticking out. What you want to have is proper orientation so that when that pad cup comes down, it comes down nice and flat and level. Okay, what you don't want is for it to hit in the back, which is what we see here. And you can see here is our tone hole. Here's our pad cup, and you can see how it hits way too heavy in the back. Okay. On the opposite side, we have here the tone hole with the pad cup hitting heavy in the front. Okay. Either one of these would create a lot of pad uncertainty. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you have proper key geometry, whereas that pad cup comes down, with that pad being in the pad cup, it's going to sit perfectly level.
Cool. So we've talked about installing the pads in terms of key fitting, leveling the pad cups, leveling the, making sure the pad cup orientation is correct. The fourth step is going to be leveling the tone holes.
Absolutely.
So we've got a couple of different tools for that. And Ryan, I'll let you talk about leveling tone holes.
Absolutely. So here we are with our body tube with our tone holes. We're working with a pad that naturally wants to stay flat. We've leveled our pad cup, which is now flat, and we've worked on our key geometry. So the last step here is really to level our tone hole. For that, I'm using a tone hole file like so with this diamond grit paper and a pilot. A lot of times I'll use a drop or two of key oil. It's going to fit directly in the tone hole like so. That pilot is going to keep it centered. And for this, I do use a hand drill. Okay. A couple things when I do use my settings, I set this clutch feature to be very light just in case something catches. It's not going to tear it apart. So it's not like I'm drilling a hole here. The other thing I'm doing is I'm setting, most drills have a high and a low feature. You don't want it to spin very, very, very fast. So that's the setting I'm going to use here. So I use a drop or two of key oil on the diamond skin, place that in the tone hole like so, and then I hold it like this. I'm not actually pressing down. Okay, I'm just supporting the drill and letting it spin. There you are. And you can actually see here on this tone hole now I have a good flat surface. Okay.
Very cool. And there's a couple of different things that we could talk about with that technique, but we'll skip that for now just for the sake of time.
Yeah, all of these, you can delve quite a bit deeper into, leveling tone holes, leveling pad cups. Obviously, one of the next things we're going to do is
level a resonator.
That's right. That's right. So what we have here is an airtight maestro. Okay. This is just a standard airtight maestro, and you can see that little lip that comes over, and actually what will happen is it will sit flat on the pad like so. What we do a little extra here in the Sax Pro Shop is we actually level that rim. So we'll actually pop this in our lathe. We have a little jig, and then we get in there and cut it so that this flat portion is, well, completely flat. So then you can see how it sits very flat. Again, flat pad, flat tone hole, flat pad cup, good key geometry. We're just setting ourselves up to hopefully succeed in this. Mm-hmm. So there we are, level the reso.
And so now you're not going to need to level every resonator, like
Right.
The plastic resonators.
Plastic ones will be fine. They're going to be flat. Obviously, we're talking about ones like this. You just have to be careful when you go into using ones like this, where you have the seamless dome, okay, where it has that rivet built into the reso. If you install your own resos, you have to be careful you don't over tighten that reso. And I'll show you what happens. So here we have a pad that is flat. We're going to install that seamless dome.
You're just using a little bit of pressure.
Yep. And you can see here, if I overexpand, what happens now is this pad has now a dip to it. I don't know if you guys can see. So there's a dip into this pad. So what I've done is I've turned this pad, which was completely flat, into something that is now dome-shaped and not completely flat. So if you do install your own resos, just be very, very careful that you install them at the correct tension, that you keep your pad nice and flat.
And in MusicMedic, when we install resonators, we have a couple of machines that are set to kind of compensate for the tolerance of the size of the rivet. And but that's true. If you're installing yours, either with it be a resonating machine like we offer, or if you have the punch, you do have to be careful to make sure that it's not too crazy.
Exactly, yeah. Get overzealous with it.
So the next thing after we flattened our resonators, if that's necessary, is to look at materials.
Right, yes.
We want to have a material that is going to be consistent and not compress over time. And Ryan, you want to talk a little bit about those two?
Sure, absolutely. I have two different types of materials here. I have natural cork, which has been used for ages in band instrument repair. Comes in a variety of thicknesses. I have 1/8 right here, and then I have this stuff right here, which we call tech cork, which is a composite material. And you can see here it comes in again a different thickness, 2.0 millimeters. That obviously being 1/8 of an inch, but what you're going to want to use when you're dealing with extreme pads, because the tolerances have to be so tight, your key fitting is tight, your pad cups are level, your tone holes are level, hopefully you're using level resonators, you have to use materials that will withstand and stay in adjustment a lot longer. So for an example, I'll take an edge of this cork and I'm just going to compress it with my pair of pliers here. Not very hard, it's about an average firm handshake. As you can see it compressed, and then when I let go, you can see how it still is compressed. I can feel this crease right in here. All right. If I do that on this piece of tech cork, I'll go ahead and tighten that down. And you can actually see same amount of pressure. When I release, it still has the same dimensions. So the tech cork stays in adjustment a lot longer. And again, when you're dealing with a pad that needs these high tolerances and needs to have tight key fitting, you obviously want your materials to stay in adjustment too, which is why, again, I would suggest using synthetic materials, tech cork, ultra suede, Teflon. The only thing we use natural cork for in the Sax Pro Shop is for Sax neck corks. So.
That's right. That's right. We do use that for the neck cork. Okay. So we've talked about materials. I don't know why I repeated what you just said.
That's okay. Really reiterate that so they really get it.
So the next thing that we're going to do is talk about adhesive. I know some technicians like to use hot melt glue, and others like to use shellac. And Ryan, I know you like to use shellac.
Yep.
Just talk about why you like to use shellac for the RooPads Extreme.
Right. Absolutely. I'm a shellac guy. I will be the first to admit it. And I'm a fan of, a lot of times I'll use the Z-gun to install saxophone pads. It's just easier. And when I do, I usually do use the clear shellac for that. I like shellac because I feel it's a little bit more stable than using, hot melt or, hot glue or whatever. I feel that hot glue has a little bit of a give to it. If you grab that stick, you can kind of press your fingernail into it. Has a little bit of give to it. With shellac, it's very firm. It's very firm. I like it because it's easy to work with. You heat it up just like with hot melt, float the same way. But I like it because it is very stable. Again, it's like materials. If you have a squishy soft material, it might go out of adjustment. If you have a squishy soft adhesive, that pad, that completely flat level pad, hitting that completely flat level tone hole, sitting in that completely flat level pad cup, won't be so flat anymore.
And then can you talk about how much shellac you like to use?
Absolutely. This is a big thing. If you have everything set up correctly, mainly your key geometry, if you have it set up like this, where that pad, as it comes down, it's perfect. You can use, just the bare minimum amount of shellac to get those micro little adjustments that you need. You don't need to really move the pad so much as if you had, maybe one of these setups. But I'll show you how much shellac I like to use on mine. You can see here, I'm just going to put just a little bit on the backing. So, and then I use my bench block, which is cool, so shellac will not stick to it, and I flatten it out. And this really gives me a good visual representation of how much shellac I put on. And I know I put the clear, so it's a little tough to see, but you can see that reflection, how it's covered that completely exposed cardboard area. And it's about as thick as a business card, okay? Maybe a little bit thicker in certain areas, okay? And that's about how much shellac I need to use. Because again, the shellac is just holding that pad up into that pad cup. And again, you get those slight micro adjustments. If you're having to really push that pad in one way or the other, you need to recheck your key geometry. Okay, it's probably one of these. If it's sitting perfectly flat and level, you got a flat pad, flat tone hole, flat pad cup, everything's flat, it will seal.
And Ryan, can we also talk about the heat source that you use? So you talked about shellac. What type of heat source do you like to use for these pads?
Me, myself, I prefer the air torch. I like it because, again, it's hot air I'm dealing with. It's not necessarily an open flame, although you can still pad your traditional way if you do use open flame, alcohol lamp, or butane torch. You can use a flamethrower if you're good with it.
Right.
But I like using the air torch because I don't really want to use the hottest temperature there is. I usually set it between, 415, 420, 430, somewhere in that range when I first put the pads in. And then as I get closer to them being more sealed and more perfect, I drop that temperature down a little bit. Okay, I drop it maybe to like 350 to 375. Okay, so I start out in the low 400s, and as the pad becomes more and more in tuned with where it needs to be, there you go.
And then how about actually installing the pads? So we've done all this prep work. We've talked about key fitting, leveling pad cups, making sure the pad cup orientation is correct, leveling the tone holes, using the proper materials, leveling the resonators if necessary. And then how do you actually install the pad?
That's the crazy thing. They install just like a regular pad. If you've put a regular tan pad in a saxophone before, you do it the same way. You're heating up the back of the pad cup. You're getting in there with some kind of thing to move it around. The biggest thing you don't want to use in traditional, repair techs will use this is a pad prick. So they'll use like a small needle spring in a pin vise, and they'll stick it in the end either to, during the installation process, or they feel it maybe vents some of the air out. That's the only thing I wouldn't do, is don't poke the end of this. Okay, you don't really need to with the RooPads Extreme. I would just use a regular pad slick. The other thing is you don't want to do the traditional way of putting something in between the tone hole and the pad cup here and then pressing down on this side to try to get the pad to move around. Okay, I would just use traditional method of your air torch. You're going to heat up the pad cup, and then you're going to get in with your pad slick and push this side down or push this side down. Other than that, it installs the same way as a regular pad.
Excellent. And then there's been a lot of questions. Do they install better or play better than the standard RooPads? And I'll answer the first part. I believe, I don't need to believe, I know that they play better than standard RooPads. I've had a couple of sets over the years now since the Extreme pads have been created here, and I can say as soon as I got them a full set on my instrument, that my instrument responded better than when they had RooPads. The sound was basically the same, but the response was so much better. And I didn't have to kind of wait for the pads to be broken in. Usually with RooPads, they don't stick, but you also have to kind of play and let your saliva get in the pads, and it seals the pads, and then it plays great. With the RooPads Extreme, they don't stick, but they also play great and respond great right from the very beginning. So I feel like that's just the main advantage of them, and that's why they play better. Do they install any better or worse than RooPads, would you say?
As far as the installation process, as long as you do all the prep work, okay, again, level, pad cups, tone holes, key geometry, materials, they're just as easy to install, but all the prep work has to happen.
Gotcha.
That's the thing. If you do all this prep work and you don't even install a RooPads Extreme, you do a regular tan pad, your padding will be so much easier. It's all about this prep work.
And then what about student instruments? I know some of you who will watch this are going to be working on a student instrument. Should they or could they install RooPads Extreme on a student instrument?
That's a great question. The answer could and should is completely different. Could you? Yes, absolutely. You could install RooPads Extremes on a student level instrument. But again, you would have to do all this prep work in order to do that. So you got to ask yourself, are you willing to do all that prep work? If you do all the prep work for, putting RooPads Extremes into a student horn, yes, it will happen. On the other hand, now, should you you have to answer that for yourself. So as long as you're
Right.
willing to do all this prep work, the keys have to be tight. Your pad cups have to be level. Your tone holes have to be level. You have to use the proper adhesive. You have to use the proper resos installed the correct way. Your materials have to be correct. What else am I missing? It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yes.
So if you
Tone
do
holes,
all this
yes.
prep stuff to a student horn, can you achieve the results that you're looking for with the RooPads Extreme? Yes, you can.
And, you know, if you're a professional technician and the customer is willing to pay for all of that work,
Absolutely.
by all means, yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, Ryan, thank you so much for that excellent information. Thank you all for watching. This has been our Wednesday Wisdom. If you are liking this live stream, please feel to like and subscribe and share this around. We're also going to be having a key fitting course with Ryan on July 22nd. And we're also going to be doing a basic repair course on June 1st. So check out MusicMedic.com for that. And until next time, happy repairing.